Hey everyone, this is Matt Hawkins from Ridge Supply. I'm here with Pete McKinney, and this is Be the Bright podcast. We are back after a serious hiatus. We have been busy with the Buck 50 and life after that, and we wanted to just get together today because we have a big trip coming up and kind of discuss all things 2022 training and racing and etc. So welcome back to the podcast. This is episode technically 51, and we hope to keep bringing some more regular content your way. So Pete, welcome.
Thanks.
Where are you today, Pete?
I'm like across the room from you.
Oh, okay. Well, welcome. I have
thanks.
I got a fancy background if you're watching this on YouTube because it hides all the junk that's back here in my half of the shop, and Pete's up in the front. So hopefully we don't cross the audio up. I wanted to kind of dive in today to like what has happened this year. We did a podcast back in January where we sort of introduced you, where you've been here for like a week.
Mm-hmm.
And then we did one in early February where you asked me some questions. It was sort of a Q&A. But I have watched you almost since the day you got here. You got into Unbound and SBT gravel almost at the same time. And you just like turned a light switch on. I mean, it's true. I watched it happen.
No, you're right.
Like, oh, you have these goals now. And so you started buckling down as far as logistics and training and whatever else. And so walk me through, like, what was that like? Why did you do that? Those are two big logistic things too.
Yeah. Well, I think initially the reason, so first summer post-retirement, the beauty of it is I can kind of do whatever I want, like I don't have the Marine Corps, if you will, like holding me back from going different places or work scheduling or whatever. Like it's a lot easier to maneuver around that. So last year when the lotteries opened for both Unbound and SBT, I was like, look, I'm not going to get into both of them. Maybe I'll get into one. I'll just throw my name in the hat for both. And then I'll target whichever one I get into if I get into one of them. And then I got into both of them first try, first year.
Yeah.
So I am, and I think you've probably come to see this, especially when it comes to training for a target. Like I like to target events. There's some people who just like to maintain a general level of fitness all year and then just kind of go race a lot and just see what happens. And I like to pick very, not big, like lofty or anything, but like specific points in the season and target that, because more than the event itself, I like the process of training.
Yeah.
And so pretty much I knew the goal was going to be, if I targeted Unbound, I could spend a solid, really, I had pretty good fitness level all winter. And then I really kind of buckled down right after Buck 50 is when I really started going pretty hard in the training.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew if I got to Unbound with a good level of fitness, I could kind of take a little breather, if you will, and then maybe do like just maintain and then maybe do like a 3 to 4 kind of spin up going into SBT, and just it was what it was. So that was kind of my plan. And that brought us to last weekend.
Yeah, I mean, you from my perspective too, like there's like a manageable time that you had more than enough time to sharpen the blade prior to the event, and you kind of waited a little while to start that process. I mean, you ride consistently, more so than I do. You ride, 4 or 5 days a week, no matter what. So whether you're training for, you have a specific goal or not, but I watched you almost immediately, like, dude, I mean, you bought a car based around, right? I mean, you were like, I've got to go to
Yeah,
Unbound. I
there's
need a new
definitely a
car. Yeah,
catalyst.
yeah. And
Yeah.
and the bikes changed a couple times. The kit needed, the preparation, the all of it. One of the things that people that probably don't know why the buck 50 started, but we started the buck 50 as even an idea because we tried to go to Dirty Kansas as a group, as a team. And I'll just say, like, we got a little led on by the director that we could do that. And then we got let down and was like, hey, they already had an apparel sponsor, and this, for some reason, that seemed like a conflict with Little Ridge Supply. And my immediate response was like, oh yeah, well, I can't come to your race. Well, watch this. I'm going to start my own. And I mean, that sounds dumb, but that's actually literally what happened. And we went around, we went to establish the event with the intent of doing a race that didn't have all of the logistics hurdles that something like Unbound now has. And it's getting, I wouldn't say it's getting worse every year, but it's like, it's just a big deal. So,
Yeah.
take me through like who did you base, like your information off of, and like, how did you like get prepared for doing such a logistic thing?
Yeah, I mean, I talked to a lot of people who have done it previously. So guys we know like Lee, and going on to forums and talking to other people through forums and things like that. But I'm also like, part of my background is like planning. Like that's what I did for especially like the last 5 years in the Marine Corps, was high level planning. So that to me is, I get really into it. But I also, and I think you'll agree with this, like I'll take other people's input on how they think I should approach it. And then most of the time I don't pay attention to any of it.
Yeah,
Like
completely ignore everyone
yeah,
else's
I'll go
sound advice. Yeah.
a totally different way. And a lot of it is because once I have in my head, this is what I'm doing, like that's what I'm doing no matter what. And for me, a lot of it is probably stubbornness. A lot of it also is, if it's in my head that this is how I'm doing it, like for example, driving to Kansas. Like I had it in my head, I'm driving to Kansas. So even though, our friend Lee, who had previously driven out there from here, said, no, you should fly. It's way easier. Like to me, it was like, no, I'm driving, because in my head, I've already made that decision and that's my process. But that was the thing. It's like, I got lucky. As soon as I got in that night, I went and I booked accommodations for Kansas. And even
Yeah.
then it was like impossible to find anything in Emporia.
Yeah.
So I already had that done. Like we had this whole plan, and then 2 weeks prior, my plan got partially changed.
Yeah.
Because of, my son's school. So I had to find a new crew member, and ended up, it worked out, but I have spreadsheets upon spreadsheets of different logistics concerns and all of that.
I think it's fascinating too, because for people who haven't done this, and I've never done the event, I have never been out there, but for the past 8 years, somebody I know well has gone out and done it, or multiple people at the same time. So I've watched the build, I've watched the crew logistics, the travel, the post race hangover, hurt locker. And I don't think people understand how much time, energy, and effort goes into it's the race itself is really hard, right? So it's an all day extreme thing, but that's almost like the one part you don't have to really worry about. Once the race starts, you just got to get to the finish line. And it's all of it's the fact that the race itself starts in the fall beforehand, and you're either maybe going to get into do it. And I just think it's fascinating because, road racing or crit racing or whatever, like a lot of times people will just be like, it's a Friday night, there's a crit in the morning, and they'll be like, well, weather's going to be good, I think I'm going to go do that crit. And that's a lot of the racer mentality in the US is like, we'll just wait and see what the weather's going to be like. And a lot of gravel events require much more planning and effort in advance. The Buck 50 is no exception, where you're talking 6 months out, you're committing to it. And then it may not be something you're stressing out about, but like just the logistics revolve around accomplishing that goal. And take me through, because there's something else that I've seen is like the fatigue of that seems to be legit. Like it is hard to stay on the grind for months,
Yeah, it's basically a race like that or any big target race, right? But I mean, you're looking at January, I knew I was going. And from that day until, June, essentially every day you're thinking, okay, I have this coming. Have I done everything? And it's just over and over and over. And go back, look through my spreadsheets, look through my plan, look at my training plan. Is this enough training? Am I doing enough training? Am I doing too much training? And oh, by the way, I'm driving like literally halfway across the country 2 days prior to the event. And you have to factor that in. And then I'm going to turn around and drive back across the country the day after the event. And it's just a lot. And by the way, you still have life, right? I have a family, I have a job, I have other things that I have to, other obligations you have to meet. And like being what I like to refer to as a working class athlete, it's not easy to do that. People think, oh, it's no big deal. You ride your bike every once in a while, you just show up to the race and you do it. But it's never that simple.
Yeah.
And like, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, like, just watching you train for it. I started a little bit later than you did, because you didn't really start before the Buck 50, but after the Buck 50, you were like locked and loaded. And I also was starting to train a week and a half after the Buck 50. I got into it, and not because I was going to Unbound, but because we're getting ready to do our trip, which we'll get into. And it's interesting because whether you have a coach or whether you were following a plan or whatever, you're going to do everything you can to get yourself to a certain date at the best shape that you can. And not everything's going to go according to plan. Some things are going to happen, whatever. But I marvel at the people that are in my social media sphere that have been orbiting around Ridge Supply for years. There is a huge amount of people that I'm in awe of that just do this all the time, like probably 3 weekends a month. They are racing or competing somewhere. And no, they're not doing Unbounds every weekend, but even people like Ian, for example, who has to pick and target things. And like when you and I go do something, we don't have those kind of pressures, or like to perform or to like whatever, like all the responsibilities. And I know those folks are getting, in a way, they're getting paid to do it, but still, just like the toll it takes on your body to like be sharp and then go do the hard thing anyway, it's just a lot. And I know we had this plan, which people don't know. And I kind of wanted to ask you, like, we who decided that we were going to do the Blue Ridge Parkway? Because I know it was kind of my idea, but this predates you working here and even retiring.
Well,
Like we talked about this like a while ago, right? Like,
yeah, I think we both kind of had the idea. Like it was always something I wanted to do um post retirement, right? Like when I would have the time, would be able to go do the Blue Ridge Parkway. I think my idea was more just the section in the North Carolina section, because I could
yeah,
do it easily over a long weekend or whatever. Um, and I had always planned to do it and just kind of as a solo thing, like hey,
yeah.
this is
You'd said you
my
wanted to ride across the country or something.
yeah. I'm
Just be a
honestly like
vagabond.
that's still a thing it's on my list. As soon as I can stop putting other stuff on the list, I'll get to that. But yeah, and then I think we talked about it prior to me even starting here.
Yeah, the way I remember it, and I could be wrong. This has been a bucket list. I don't have a bucket list, but this has been a bucket list trip for me,
Mm-hmm.
where I was like, someday I want to ride the whole Blue Ridge Parkway plus Skyline Drive unsupported. I had this sense that a lot of people had done it, but I think that's actually a misnomer. I didn't realize how little opportunities there are to camp, how few resources there are up there, and then also how you pretty much have to go in the summer for things to be open. And even those things aren't even really that open. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I remember for me, I remember when we first started the brand and Worlds was in Richmond, um, Gavin Mannion and Lachlan Morton were doing this ride where they left from Richmond and rode over to the top of the parkway and then rode all the way down, and they were doing the trip. And I was like, I mean, I've been in business for a couple months. I sent those guys some socks and they used those socks on the trip. And but they did it, you know, with world tour legs and stuff like that, and just banged it out. But they did it in that true like Lachlan style, where I think they had like a bar bag,
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
credit card, and they
Yeah.
just like they did it. But and then no joke, I swear, I think it rained. I'll never get to ask them in person, but I feel like it rained like 4 out of the 6 days that they were on the road. Um, but it was summer rain and whatever else, or it'd be fall rain. The reality is like this trip, this road is like a place that when people, if you've never ridden it or been up there, the Parkway and Skyline Drive, there is no other place like it. It's just like a really super long road that there's hardly any cars on. It's super bike friendly. It's gorgeous, but it's also hard enough where it isn't boring. There's so much climbing. You're on the ridge line. And just to be able to go do that unsupported, well, for me, it was a really cool idea. Well, when I would go with 100 people if they wanted to do it, but you were the one person who was like, I'm in. And we
Mm-hmm.
kind of we were going to go in April. And in a way it all works out. We changed the plan for a couple of reasons. One, we had to wait for you to do Unbound, and then 2, we had to wait for services to open. And had we
Yeah.
gone in April, we would have been dirtbagging it, trying to camp illegally places probably, just because of the way things are open or not.
Well, and part of this, like what you and I talked about, is us doing this trip. Obviously, we're not going to have, Rafa or anybody following us around filming it, but, we'll do our own little Instagram stuff and whatever. And we want it to be repeatable for people,
Yeah.
and kind of inspire other people to get out there and do something like this, whether this
Yeah.
is it or not. And that's hard to do when you're like, yeah, I camped in this bush on the side of the road and don't do this, but this is what I did.
Yeah. Yeah. I personally been inspired by what Steven and the Rodeo Labs crew has been able to do on some of their stuff. I watched Steven kind of build up to do the Morocco race a few years ago, and he dedicated a lot of time. He got super fit and he went out there and he crushed it. But it was like I'm not speaking for him, but just it was like a life-changing experience on the bike in a lot of ways, and also like a reset. And for me, I've not been able to really dedicate myself to getting my fitness where it needs to be, or taking the time to do something selfishly like this. And so I've been struggling with that more than anything, because unlike a lot of other folks, and it's not an excuse, but like I have so many like responsibilities, if you will, that it's really hard to like put the bike and the training and the trip above those responsibilities. But I was able to do that. And
Well,
you know,
so let's talk about that for a minute, right? With you.
from your perspective, I want to hear that.
Well, it's not that it's from my perspective. I think I am interested to know, and I think other people are too, obviously the trip has been somewhat of an impetus for you to, hey, if we're going to do this, I got to at least have some sort of repeatable daily fitness to accomplish this. And so like, what was your mindset and your process for kind of catalyzing you to doing that? I don't know if that's a word. I may have just made it up.
Yeah, no. Yeah. You might know this, it's maybe frustrating, but like I have a level of riding that I can get to pretty quickly that is fine for a 90-minute, 2-hour, slugfest.
Mm-hmm.
And I can ride the trainer, or I can do a bunch of fast rides or whatever, and I can get the blade kind of sharp pretty quick. But and that doesn't mean that I'm like gifted in that way. It's just like that's kind of my level, like my normal level. But I never really have put in the time and the hours in the saddle repetitively to build the fitness aspect of it, where I could do, I could do those rides and maybe be breathing through a straw, like I like to say, and this hasn't been a race goal. So it's been kind of weird. I wasn't trying to like beat a certain time or say like, I've got to push this many watts for this many hours or whatever. It's a lot of unknown. It's for people who don't know what we're going to do. It's like, we're doing 6 days, basically averaging 85 to 95 miles a day with about 10,000 feet of climbing. And then one big day at the end for like 133 miles to finish it off. So it's 6 days, basically like just figure on an average of 100 miles a day with 10,000 feet, which when you have 14 hours of daylight, it's not like that's going to be like hard to accomplish. It's just the repetitive fatigue and you can't train for that. You can't. And I'm sorry if you can hear my dog. She's right here. I don't know how much audio is doing that, but they're basically like, I've never done this before. You've done a 10-day, 100-mile tour, but at a much lower intensity effort and with support and not carrying bags and all these other things like we're going to be doing. And so there's a lot of unknown for both of us. So I just knew my job was to like get as fit as I could in the time that I had, which wasn't a lot of time. I don't know. It's been 3 months, let's say.
Yeah.
But for a guy like myself, who maybe rides 2 to 3 days a week consistently, to change that to 6 days a week, and we're basically like, I got a coach. I've had a training plan. I've had something to do every day, even if that's active recovery. That's been cool. I had one setback a couple weeks ago where I got sick and I lost a little bit of fitness, but mentally I'm fine. I didn't get off the wagon too much, and I was able to kind of get back to it. And I feel like I'm as ready as I can be. And hang on one second here.